All right, cool. So can you give us an intro about yourself first?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for not all leaving once she said that I was from the Fed. It might help to know, I think some of you already know this, so as Shinju said, I'm Sunaina. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of the Federal Reserve. This is the first time in the 100-year history of the Fed that they've had this role. Though my 10-year-old cousin reminded me 2 weekends ago, well, technically you're not the first Chief Innovation Officer, because Alexander Hamilton was the first Chief Innovation Officer because he innovated the Fed. I said, okay, I am not going to compete with that. So, but prior to that, I spent my entire career in the private sector, and really, I would say the last decade fully immersed in advancing, I would say, change and transformation at the nexus of finance, technology. Policy is very important when you're trying to disrupt finance in North America. Did a lot of work in fintech and crypto in North America and in Asia. So suffice to say, until a year ago, I was very much a DeFi degen. So I am so delighted to be back with my tribe.
So what did you know about the Fed now that you didn't know before?
Yeah, I'll share a little story. So when I first got, the thing is, we don't answer random calls anymore, and I don't know why I answered this call that I got. And this lady said, oh, my name is so-and-so, I'm calling from this executive recruiting firm, and this person recommended that we reach out to you, and I'm calling on behalf of the Federal Reserve. And I literally started laughing because I thought it was one of my Bitcoin friends or DeFi friends pulling some sort of a prank on me. I was like, yeah, okay, who put you up to this, right? And then this went on for literally 10 minutes, and then she said, why don't you Google me? And I did, and she turned out to be an executive recruiter for a real executive recruiting firm. I'm like, okay, how am I going to recover with flair on this? I've just been harassing this poor lady. And then my next question was, central banking, innovation, isn't that like an oxymoron? And then she went on to tell me about, what the Fed was trying to achieve and why they were creating this role. And frankly, then I was like, have you Googled me? I've kind of been dunking on the Fed my entire career and been on the opposite side of the table fighting and arguing with you folks. But suffice to say, I always joke, I don't have a whole lot of skills, but I think curiosity is like my one superpower. And in this case, my curiosity superseded my skepticism. And it was like a 9-month, what is this role about? It's the first time, so there's a lot of autonomy. But I was also very clear. So there's some things that I learned about going through that process, and now that I've been inside the Fed. And by the way, I have looked up and down the Eccles building. I have not found the money printer go burr machine yet, but I will let you know if I do. But one thing that really opened my eyes that might be relevant to this crowd is, one, interestingly enough, the central bank of the United States is not at all central. It is, as I described it to my Canadian parents, it's like a solar system, because the central bank of the United States, unlike central banks around the world, is a confluence or an aggregation of 12 reserve banks and the board of governors in DC. So I often like to say, you think the Fed doesn't understand DeFi? Oh, the Fed understands DeFi, because they're like DeFi, they're completely decentralized. So that's interesting to learn because of how decisions get made, how the Fed stays connected to the communities it serves. So that was one. And also it makes my job very interesting because majority of the people at the Fed are tethered to an individual reserve bank or the board of governors. I think we have 3 or 4 roles, including mine now, where our job is to think about the solar system, is to think about the franchise, and everything my team and I do from advancing innovation, it has to be, for the franchise, right? And then the other thing I'll just share is, when I asked them, what do you need an innovation officer for? And I learned that there's 5,000 technologists that work at the Fed. I don't know about you, but I was like, wait, what? Why? And so the Fed today builds, manages, and maintains 7 payment rails on behalf of the United States that also serve the global financial services communities, a lot of which I know builders in this room are trying to disrupt, which is totally cool, and a lot of that requires a lot of technology behind it, right? So we have teams comprised of some of the best engineers, cybersecurity professionals, as you can imagine. Cyber threat is real. Scrum masters, agile developers, UX designers. So, that is something I know I had an aha moment. And the reason I share that is, and with this community and why we're here is because this community is also comprised with some of the best engineering, design, and product talent, and kind of to learn, to listen. And on that note, I do want to thank you, because every time I put out the bat signal to say, listen, we want to meet with DeFi builders and understand how they're interrogating this technology, what they're building, what we should be learning, you've always come through. And it's been very productive. I've been here since Tuesday, and I brought along a few of my other Fed colleagues. As I like to joke, my job is to try and red pill them, and their job is to try and Fed pill me, and we'll see who wins at the end. But part of that red pilling is, and to their credit, they've been here all week from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. We've been doing like back-to-back industry dialogues. And it's really coming from a place of humility and curiosity, which I know are not words you probably associate with the Fed, to say as builders, and we have a rule, no decks allowed, no lawyers allowed, no lobbyists allowed. We legit want to learn from engineers and builders to say, why this technology? What's working? What's not working? What problem are you trying to solve? Why are you trying to solve this problem? What problem should the Fed be solving that the industry can't or doesn't want to solve? So that for us has been super productive, and hopefully some aha moments for you guys.
Yeah, that's really great. So having come from the private sector, what do you think we as an industry can do differently or better to collaborate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think tying back to what I was just saying is I think that dialogue is so important. I know it seems like a low-hanging fruit, but I have literally witnessed sitting in rooms. I brought a few of my colleagues to San Francisco a couple months ago when Shinju helped out. I was like, listen, I need to talk to like DeFi folks, but I don't need their lawyers or lobbyists. Like, I want to talk to like the founders and like the people who are nearest to this technology. And you would think like a bunch of policymakers from the Fed and like next gen, DeFi builders whose entire ethos is to destroy centralized finance. But there was more agreement than there was disagreement, right? There was agreement about the problems that builders in DeFi were trying to solve, and my colleagues and I were like, yeah, those are absolute friction points in the system today. There's still unnecessary opacity and complexity, and instead of having a big tent, we leave a lot of people out. Now, we may disagree about how we solve for it, right? But at least, so even for me, I was like, okay, there is a lot of agreement, but that agreement would never have been obvious if people didn't come to the room with a sense of curiosity and say, we're here to listen and learn. We may debate how we get to the solution, and that's okay. We may debate about where you take lead and we follow, and where we take lead and you follow, and that's okay. And again, I wanted, like, even this week, like I was just having a quick meet up with my team, because we're actually doing a session we've never done, and definitely not a consensus ever, called Demystifying the Federal Reserve. And we're doing that by design, because there's a lot of FUD about crypto that I like to correct internally, but there's also a lot of FUD about the Fed that I think it would benefit builders in this ecosystem to know, no, this is clickbait and don't buy it, and this is the real stuff. So I think that dialogue, and I think the other thing I would implore all of you is, this sounds like such a Washington thing to say, and I do spend half my time in Washington, is decisions really are made by those who show up, right? Yep. And if the DeFi community, the crypto community doesn't take the time to educate and engage with the Fed or other counterparts, guess what? The incumbents know how to talk to the DC regulators, and they show up and they make their opinions known. So if you're in their seat, so example, we dropped our discussion document at the end of January, kind of very transparently sharing how we're interrogating this notion of a CBDC. Should there be a CBDC? Why? What would be the design principles? And a whole slew of questions where for the first time the Fed, I hope you saw, came with a sense of humility to say, we don't know how to think about these things, and that's why we want to learn from industry. And as expected, there was an open comment period. The incumbents know how to respond, and they come at it. And that's why we were out in San Francisco meeting with a lot of the builders in the ecosystem saying, we know you have opinions about this, and you got to share it. Because if not, then the Fed's going to go, oh, okay, these are the opinions, but it doesn't represent the full ecosystem. So I would say those are two things I would definitely implore all of you. Again, you're closest to the technology. You're solving some very important problems, gnarly problems, as I like to say. And some of those problems are the ones that we are also trying to solve. And our intent really is, how can we do it in a way that's symbiotic and complementary? So I think that only happens through those open, candid, doesn't mean we'll always agree. Spicy conversations and debates are also healthy, but just having that opportunity to listen and learn and have that dialogue. Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. So next question, what is some FUD that you commonly come across about the Fed?
About the Fed, I think the one very early on, I went back to some of my, because I've been in Bitcoin since 2010, 2011, is, the rhetoric of, the central bank. I was like, there's nothing central about the central bank. Let me tell you how decisions are really made at the Fed, right? I wish some days it was more central, trust me, but, so I think that one always amuses me. I think this other, again, I touched on it a little bit earlier, is that this notion that the Fed is only a policy-making shop. I think it's, again, important to realize that, and this impacts how I advance innovation within the Fed, is the Fed has a massive research function. And research actually is done in a decentralized way by design, right? When you see the Beige Book reports, for any of you who follow, right? That's why that research is spread out across the 12 reserve banks. And if any of you are curious about the history of the Fed, and I did a lot of learning before I joined the Fed, the whole notion of starting a Fed was also innovation, because the United States tried to start a central bank a couple times and it didn't work because it was fully centralized. So the third time that they tried to build a Fed, they said, we're going to do it like we built the country, which is we have the government in DC, but it's states' rights, which I know can sometimes be annoying when you have to go get money transmitter licenses from all 50 states. Been there, done that, right? So it's that bifurcation, and that, what decisions are made at the federal level versus what's, decentralized, which I think, again, ties to the ethos here. I think the other thing that, that I would just implore you to think about is that I have learned is it is one of the most mission-driven organizations I've been a part of. Again, don't trust me. I have a lot of spicy debates and conversations with my colleagues at the Fed, but what I admire is they're driven by this mission, and they take it very seriously that they're here to serve the country and in some ways serve the globe, given the dominance of the US dollar. And in fact, we're actually kicking off a program called FedCorps. Think of it as Peace Corps, but for the Federal Reserve. And tell your friends about it. Because as I said, we have a whole lot of gnarly problems we need to solve. Everything from the CBDC stuff we talk about, but other things that we also need to solve for. And we are acknowledging we don't have talent. Like, we need the next generation talent that knows AI, machine learning, DLT, blockchain, you name it. We can play buzzword bingo. And so how do we attract to say, you know what? This is an opportunity, like, frankly, not to sound cheesy, and I'm going off like what we talked about, is when I literally sat down and thought about, am I really doing this? Like, what's happening? Like, am I really gonna go work at the Fed? And I had a conversation with my dad, and my parents are immigrants. I'm an immigrant to this country. My parents live in Canada. And I've often said, this country in Canada has given so much to me and my family. And I always said, I want to give back. I have a lot of talents to give back to this country. And for me, I was like, maybe this is my one opportunity, and where, my DeFi, crypto, fintech skills are actually meaningful and can help shape some of the future decisions about money. And like, that was my thing. Like, maybe this is my opportunity. And I know in the crypto community, in the DeFi community, knowing the problems you all are focused on solving, there is that sense of mission. There is that sense of we want to make a meaningful dent. And it's not all about speculation, though that's important too, and yield farming. But, so I think I want to, if nothing else, I want you to take that away, is that if you have that desire to serve your country, this could be another opportunity, and hit me up on LinkedIn, and I would love to connect with you, because that definitely was an eye-opener for me. And every day it codifies that, okay, I am where I should be right now to hopefully make a meaningful dent.
Yeah, I love that. I think we're at time. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you all. I appreciate it.